Linda Hastings had been the pool attendant at Riverside Meadows HOA for 6 years when she made a decision that would destroy her reputation and cost the Homeowners Association $4.3 million. She was 52 years old, experienced enough to know better, but apparently convinced that her judgment about who belonged in an affluent suburban community was infallible. One Saturday afternoon in July, she saw 3 black children swimming in the community pool and decided they couldn't possibly be residents. What Hastings did next, ignoring their explanations, refusing to verify their residency with the parent sitting 30 feet away, and calling the police on children aged 12, 10, and 8, would become a textbook example of how racial profiling destroys communities, costs money, and exposes systems that protect bias over people. But here's what makes this story different. The mother of those 3 children wasn't just any resident. She was Vanessa Mitchell, a civil rights attorney who specialized in housing discrimination and HOA governance law. And she'd spent the last 18 months documenting a pattern of discriminatory behavior at Riverside Meadows that the HOA board had ignored, dismissed, and covered up. Linda Hastings picked the wrong children. The HOA board picked the wrong case to defend. And both would learn that ignoring patterns has consequences. 3 children, Mia, 12, Jordan, 10, and Cameron, 8, were doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing on a Saturday afternoon in summer, swimming in their community pool. Their guest passes were with their mother, who sat in a lounge chair less than 30 feet away, visible, available, ready to verify their residency. No violation, no disturbance, no threat. Just 3 kids enjoying the pool at the subdivision where they'd lived for 3 years. But to Linda Hastings, the sight of 3 black children without an immediately visible white parent was enough to trigger assumptions so powerful that verifying the truth became impossible. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring accountability to light. Riverside Meadows sits on the northern edge of Franklin County, Tennessee, a sprawling subdivision of 340 homes built between 2015 and 2019 on former farmland. It's the kind of development that markets itself as family-friendly. Winding streets named after trees, pristine sidewalks, playground equipment that looks like it belongs in a municipal park, and a clubhouse with an Olympic-sized pool, surrounded by privacy fencing and manicured landscaping. The homes range from $450,000 to $780,000. The HOA dues are $195 per month. The demographic is overwhelmingly white, 87% according to the 2020 census, and overwhelmingly professional. Doctors, lawyers, corporate executives, small business owners. It's the kind of place where people move for the schools, the safety, the sense of belonging to something exclusive. The community pool opens Memorial Day weekend and closes Labor Day. During peak summer months, it's packed every afternoon with families, parents in lounge chairs scrolling through phones, teenagers playing volleyball in the shallow end, younger children shrieking as they cannonball off the diving board. The pool rules are posted on a laminated sign near the entrance. Residents must show their pool pass. Guests must be accompanied by residents. No glass containers, no running, no diving in the shallow end. It was 3:47 p.m. on Saturday, July 15th, 2023. The temperature had hit 94 degrees. The pool was crowded. At least 60 people spread across lounge chairs, the pool deck, and in the water. The smell of chlorine mixed with sunscreen hung in the humid air. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker someone had brought. Laughter echoed off the clubhouse walls. The kind of summer afternoon where nothing dramatic typically happens. Until it does. Vanessa Mitchell had been a civil rights attorney for 14 years. 14 years representing clients in housing discrimination cases, employment law violations, and civil rights litigation. She'd spent 8 years at the Tennessee Fair Housing Council, handling cases involving landlords who refused to rent to families with children, HOAs that selectively enforced rules against minority residents, and real estate agents who steered black buyers away from white neighborhoods. For the last 6 years, she'd run her own practice specializing in HOA governance and discrimination law. She'd successfully sued 3 Tennessee HOAs for discriminatory enforcement. won settlements totaling $8.6 million and been quoted in national publications about the intersection of housing law and civil rights. Her colleagues called her relentless. Her clients called her their advocate when no one else would fight. The Tennessee Bar Association had recognized her with their Justice Award for pro bono service. She knew the law. She knew HOAs. And she knew discrimination when she saw it. Mitchell had graduated from Howard University with a degree in political science, then earned her JD from Vanderbilt Law School, where she'd clerked for a federal district court judge and served as editor of the Vanderbilt Journal of Social Justice. She'd passed the Tennessee bar on her first attempt and immediately started working in civil rights law. She'd published articles on HOA governance in the Tennessee Bar Journal. She'd lectured at continuing legal education seminars. She was exactly the kind of attorney HOA boards should fear: experienced, credentialed, and deeply knowledgeable about the specific laws governing their operations. At 42 years old, Vanessa Mitchell was a single mother raising 3 children while running a solo law practice. She'd purchased her home in Riverside Meadows 3 years earlier, in 2020, deliberately choosing a community with good schools and family amenities. She paid her HOA dues, on time. She followed the rules. She volunteered for the Neighborhood Watch Committee. She was also one of 7 black families in a subdivision of 340 homes. And from the day she moved in, she'd noticed the difference in how rules were enforced. That Saturday afternoon, Mitchell had brought her 3 children, Mia, Jordan, and Cameron, to the community pool for an afternoon of swimming. They'd arrived at 2:15 p.m., checked in at the pool gate, and claimed a small cluster of lounge chairs near the shallow end. Mitchell wore a simple black one-piece swimsuit with a cover-up. She'd brought a beach bag containing towels, sunscreen, water bottles, snacks, and, critically, the family's pool passes in a plastic sleeve, along with a folder containing 3 months of documentation: incident reports, photographs, witness statements, and a draft complaint she'd been preparing. Her children had been swimming for over an hour. Mitchell had been monitoring them from her chair, reading a legal brief on her tablet, occasionally looking up to check on them. She was 30 feet from the pool, visible, available, doing exactly what dozens of other parents were doing. But to someone who'd spent 6 years deciding who belonged and who didn't, Mitchell's visible presence wouldn't be enough. To Linda Hastings, the pool attendant, 3 black children swimming without an immediately adjacent white parent were a problem, and Hastings had decided to solve that problem the way she'd solved similar problems before, by demanding they leave. Linda Hastings was 52 years old. She'd been the pool attendant and facility manager at Riverside Meadows for 6 years. Hired in 2017, when the community was still being built, she was conscientious about keeping the pool clean, vigilant about enforcing rules, and deeply invested in maintaining what she called the character of the community. Her supervisors on the HOA board described her as dedicated but sometimes overzealous. Residents described her as the woman who watched everyone constantly, enforcing minor violations while ignoring the same behavior from families she knew. In 6 years, Linda Hastings had generated a pattern that should have triggered alarm at every board meeting. 14 documented complaints from residents. 14. 9 of those complaints came from families of color. All 9 involved allegations of discriminatory enforcement, demanding IDs from black and Hispanic residents while waving through white residents without question, questioning whether minority children belonged in the pool, despite valid passes, selectively enforcing guest policies, following black residents around the facility, and calling the police on residents of color for minor rule violations, while handling identical situations with white residents through warnings. The Mitchell family alone had filed 4 complaints in 3 years. Hastings had demanded to see their pool passes on 6 separate occasions, despite recognizing them as regular attendees. She'd questioned whether their guests were authorized, even when Mitchell presented documentation. She'd told their children to keep the noise down, while ignoring louder white children nearby. She'd asked to see Mitchell's ID when she entered the clubhouse for a resident meeting. Each complaint had been reviewed by the HOA board. Each had resulted in the same response: "We've spoken with Linda. She takes her job seriously. No further action needed." But the pattern was undeniable. Hastings treated residents differently based on race, and the HOA board had documentation of that pattern going back 4 years. That Saturday afternoon at 3:47 p.m., Hastings looked across the crowded pool and saw three black children, Mia, Jordan, and Cameron Mitchell, swimming in the deep end. She didn't see their mother 30 feet away in a lounge chair. She didn't check the sign-in log that showed they'd checked in nearly 2 hours earlier. She didn't consider that she'd seen these same children dozens of times over 3 years. In her mind, three black children without a visible white parent meant unauthorized use. It meant potential liability. It meant people who didn't belong. She didn't think about calling out to ask if their parent was present. She didn't think about checking the attendance log. She just walked directly to the pool edge and ordered them out. Hastings walked across the pool deck at 3:48 p.m., carrying her clipboard, moving with the posture of someone convinced they were preventing a problem. Her eyes were fixed on the three children. She didn't scan the lounge chairs. She didn't look for a parent. She'd already decided what the problem was and how to solve it. She stopped at the edge of the deep end and called out loud enough for the entire pool to hear. Do you think pool attendants should face consequences for calling police on minority residents with valid access? Drop your answer below. The Mitchell children were treading water near the diving board when they heard the sharp voice cut across the ambient noise of the pool. You kids need to get out of the pool. Mia, the oldest at 12, looked up. She recognized Linda Hastings immediately. They'd dealt with her before. She swam to the edge. Why? We live here. Hastings's expression was already set. Skeptical, dismissive, convinced she was right. I don't think so. This pool is for residents only. Jordan, 10, swam over next to his sister. Cameron, 8, stayed back, nervous. We are residents. Our mom signed us in. Where's your pool pass? Mia pointed across the pool deck toward where their mother sat reading. Mom has it. She's right over there. Hastings didn't look. She didn't turn her head. She kept her eyes fixed on the children. I need to see it now, or you're leaving. Cameron started swimming toward them, his voice small. We're not leaving. We didn't do anything wrong. Hastings's voice got louder. Other people at the pool were turning to watch now. This is private property. If you don't have proof of residency, you're trespassing. Jordan's frustration was building. They'd been through this before with Hastings, always demanding proof, always questioning whether they belonged. Our mom is literally sitting right there. You can ask her. Jordan pointed again, more insistently this time. Vanessa Mitchell was visible, less than 30 feet away, her lounge chair clearly in view. Hastings finally glanced in the direction Jordan was pointing. She saw a black woman in a lounge chair reading something on a tablet. Her expression didn't soften. I'm telling you to leave. Now. Mia felt the familiar knot in her stomach. This was humiliating. Everyone was watching. White kids were swimming all around them without anyone asking them for passes. But here was Hastings, demanding they prove they belonged. You're making a mistake. Hastings crossed her arms, her clipboard tucked against her chest. The only mistake is you three thinking you can use this pool without authorization. Cameron was close to tears. Jordan's jaw was clenched. Mia made one final attempt. Our mom is Vanessa Mitchell. She's on the HOA legal team. That was an exaggeration. Mitchell wasn't on the HOA's legal team, but she was a lawyer who dealt with the HOA on legal matters. Mia hoped the title might make Hastings pause. It didn't. I don't care if she's the mayor. Get out of the pool. This is where bias becomes impenetrable. Linda Hastings had seen three black children without an immediately adjacent white parent and filled in a narrative. Unauthorized users, potential troublemakers, people who didn't belong. Every piece of evidence after that, the children's calm explanations, the visible parent 30 feet away, the fact that she'd seen these children dozens of times before, was filtered through her initial assumption. She wasn't looking at resident children swimming in their own community pool. She was looking at trespassers who needed to be removed, and no amount of explanation would penetrate that certainty. Vanessa Mitchell had been monitoring the situation from the moment Hastings's voice rose above the ambient noise. She'd heard every word. She'd watched her children try to explain, try to point her out, try to reason with someone who'd decided reason wasn't relevant. She stood, grabbed her beach bag, and walked toward the pool. The pool deck had gone quieter now. Conversations had stopped. Parents were watching. A teenager pulled out her phone and started recording. Hastings was still standing at the pool edge, arms crossed, waiting for the children to comply. Mitchell's voice cut across the space, calm but unmistakable in its authority. "Is there a problem here?" Hastings turned. She saw Mitchell approaching, and her expression tightened further. "These children don't have proof of residency. I've asked them to leave." Mitchell stopped at the pool edge, standing next to Hastings. She reached into her beach bag and pulled out the plastic sleeve containing 3 laminated pool passes with the Mitchell family name, address, and resident ID numbers clearly printed. She held them up, making sure Hastings could see them clearly. "These are my children. Here are our pool passes. We checked in at 2:15 p.m. We're residents. We've been residents for 3 years, and you've asked to see our passes 6 times in the last 4 months, despite the fact that you recognize us." Hastings glanced at the passes. Her expression didn't change. "You should have these with you at all times. They were with me. I'm their parent. I'm sitting right there." Mitchell gestured to her lounge chair, still visible, less than 30 feet away. "I need to see ID as well." Mitchell's voice remained controlled, but the edge was sharpening. "You don't need my ID. You have our pool passes. You have our check-in record. And you're singling out my children for enforcement. You don't apply to anyone else in this pool." Hastings's face flushed. She was cornered and she knew it, but she wasn't backing down. "I'm enforcing the rules equally." "You're not." Mitchell turned and pointed to a group of white children playing in the shallow end, their parents nowhere in immediate sight. "Those 4 children over there have been in the pool for 30 minutes. I haven't seen you ask them for passes. I haven't seen you verify their parents are here. You didn't approach them. You approached my children." Again. The crowd was watching now. Phones were up. A woman near the gate called out, "She's right. You haven't checked anyone else's passes." Another voice, a man sitting with his family near the diving board. "I've been here 2 hours. Nobody asked me for my pass." Hastings's voice rose, defensive, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have the authority to verify residency for anyone using this facility, then verify everyone, not just the black kids." Hastings pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Mitchell didn't flinch. She'd been expecting this. It was exactly what Hastings had done before to other minority residents. Escalate to law enforcement when her authority was questioned. "Go ahead. Call them. Make sure you tell them you're calling because 3 children with valid pool passes are swimming while black." Hastings dialed. The crowd listened as she spoke to dispatch. "I need an officer at Riverside Meadows Community Pool. We have trespassers refusing to leave." Mitchell's voice was loud, clear, directed at the crowd and the phone's recording. "My name is Vanessa Mitchell. I'm a civil rights attorney. My children are residents with valid pool passes. We are not trespassing. This woman has a documented history of racially profiling minority residents, and she just escalated a non-incident to a police call because she cannot accept that black children belong in this community." The pool was silent except for the sound of water lapping against tile. No one was swimming now. Everyone was watching. Hastings ended the call and turned to Mitchell. "You can explain it to the police when they get here." "I will. And they'll see our passes, our check-in record, and the video everyone's recording of you targeting my children while ignoring identical situations with white families." Mitchell pulled her phone from her bag and held it up. "I'm recording too. And unlike the last 4 times you harassed my family, this time we have documentation everyone can see. Should HOA boards face personal liability when they ignore documented patterns of discrimination? Let me know what you think." Franklin County Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Webb arrived at the pool at 4:02 p.m., 14 minutes after Hastings' call. Webb was a 17-year veteran who'd been assigned to Riverside Meadows' district for 8 years. He knew the community, he knew the residents, and he'd responded to calls from Linda Hastings before. He walked through the pool gate and immediately assessed the situation. A crowded pool, dozens of people watching and recording. 3 children standing at the pool edge dripping water, a black woman with documentation in her hands, and Linda Hastings with her arms crossed and her face flushed. Webb had seen this setup before. He approached Mitchell first. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Webb. Can you tell me what's going on? Mitchell handed him the pool passes. My children have been swimming for nearly 2 hours. We're residents. We checked in when we arrived. Ms. Hastings approached my children and demanded they leave the pool, despite having valid passes, and despite me being present and visible 30 feet away. When I presented documentation, she called you. Webb examined the passes. They were legitimate, professionally printed, laminated, with resident information matching the HOA database he could access on his phone. You live here? 35 Oakmont Drive. We've lived here 3 years. Webb pulled out his phone and verified the address against county records. Vanessa Mitchell, owner of record, 3 years of property tax payments. He turned to Hastings. Linda, why did you call this in as trespassing? Hastings' defense was already crumbling, but she held on to it. They didn't have their passes visible. I asked them to leave and they refused. They had passes. Their mother was present. What's the issue? They wouldn't comply with my request. Webb's voice dropped. Professional but unmistakably firm. Because they weren't trespassing. They're residents with valid access. I have the authority to verify residency. You do, and you verified it. She showed you the passes. That should have ended it. A woman in the crowd called out, Sarah Chen, a resident Mitchell knew from HOA meetings. Deputy, this isn't the first time. Linda does this constantly. She's demanded IDs from every black family in this community multiple times. She never asks white residents. Webb turned toward the voice. Chen stepped forward. I've been coming to this pool for 4 years. She's never once asked to see my pass. Not once. But I've watched her stop black families every single week. A man near the diving board spoke up. David Torres. Same here. My family is Hispanic. She's asked us for ID 6 times this summer. 6. I've never seen her ask the Anderson family. I've never seen her ask the Petersons. Webb looked at Hastings. Her face was pale now. Is this true? Do you have a pattern of selectively enforcing these rules? I enforce the rules for everyone. That's not what these residents are saying. Mitchell stepped forward, pulling a folder from her beach bag. Deputy, I have documentation. 4 formal complaints filed with the HOA board over 3 years. 6 incidents of Ms. Hastings demanding our IDs or passes when white families weren't asked. Witness statements from other minority residents about similar treatment. And the HOA board's responses dismissing each complaint with no disciplinary action. She handed the folder to Webb. He opened it and scanned the contents. Complaint forms with HOA board stamps. Incident reports with dates and times. Emails from other residents corroborating the pattern. You filed 4 complaints? 4. The board took no action on any of them. Webb closed the folder and turned to Hastings. Linda, you need to leave the pool area. Now. What? I work here. You just called 911 on resident children with valid access after multiple residents confirmed you have a pattern of discriminatory enforcement. You're creating a liability for the HOA and a safety issue for these families. Leave the pool area. Hastings' mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she seemed to understand the situation had turned. I was doing my job. You were profiling residents. That's not your job. Leave. Hastings looked at Mitchell, at the crowd, at the phones still recording. She walked toward the gate, shoulders stiff, face burning with humiliation and anger. Webb turned to Mitchell. Ma'am, I apologize that you had to go through this. Your children have every right to be here. Thank you, Deputy. But an apology doesn't fix the pattern. The HOA board has ignored this problem for years. I've documented it, I've reported it, and nothing changed. Until now. What do you mean? Mitchell's voice was calm, measured, but carried the weight of someone who'd made a decision. I'm filing a federal lawsuit against the HOA board members individually, and Ms. Hastings. Civil rights violations, housing discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The board had notice of the pattern. They took no action. That makes them liable. Webb nodded slowly. He'd been a cop long enough to know when someone had a case. I'll make sure my report documents everything. And I recommend you get copies of all the pool videos from today. I will. Thank you. Mitchell walked back to her children, who were standing together near the pool edge. still dripping, still processing what had just happened. She crouched down to Cameron's level. "You did nothing wrong. None of you did anything wrong. Do you understand that?" Cameron nodded, but his eyes were red. "Why does she always do that to us?" "Because she's biased, baby. Because she sees us and makes assumptions based on our skin color instead of the truth." Mia's voice was harder, angrier. "It's not fair. It's not. And that's why we document it. And that's why we fight back." Jordan looked at his mother. "Are we going to sue them?" "Yes, we are." The crowd around them started to disperse, but several residents approached Mitchell. Sarah Chen, David Torres, 3 other families of color. Chen spoke first. "If you're filing a lawsuit, we'll testify. We've all dealt with this. I'll be calling you. All of you." By 6:30 p.m. that same evening, the videos had spread across social media. Multiple angles from multiple residents. Hastings demanding the children leave. Mitchell presenting pool passes. Witnesses calling out the discriminatory pattern. Hastings calling 911. Deputy Webb ordering Hastings to leave the pool. Headlines appeared within hours. Pool attendant calls cops on black kids with valid passes. Their mom is civil rights attorney. Tennessee HOA pool manager fired after targeting minority children. Pool. While black trends after viral video shows. Kids harassed at their own community pool. The outrage was immediate and intense. The Tennessee Fair Housing Council issued a statement condemning the incident and calling for DOJ investigation of Riverside Meadows. The NAACP demanded accountability. Local news stations ran the story as their lead. The HOA board issued a brief statement. "We are aware of the incident and are conducting an internal review. It was too little, far too late." Linda Hastings was terminated 48 hours after the incident. The termination letter, signed by all 5 HOA board members, was brief and final. Ms. Hastings' employment is terminated immediately due to conduct incompatible with the HOA's non-discrimination policies and creation of legal liability for the association. Hastings released a statement through her attorney. "I was doing my job enforcing pool rules. I regret that the situation escalated. The apology didn't mention race. It didn't acknowledge the pattern. It didn't accept responsibility. It changed nothing." Vanessa Mitchell filed her lawsuit in federal court on August 3, 2023, 19 days after the incident. The complaint was comprehensive and devastating. Defendants named Linda Hastings, individually, Riverside Meadows HOA, as an entity, and all 5 HOA board members individually. Richard Donovan, President, Susan Palmer, Vice President, Greg Thomas, Treasurer, Jennifer Wu, Secretary, and Mark Keller, Member at Large. The claims were extensive. Violation of the Fair Housing Act for discriminatory treatment based on race. Violation of the Civil Rights Act for racial discrimination in contractual relationships. Violation of federal law for deprivation of civil rights under color of state law. Intentional infliction of emotional distress on minor children. Negligent hiring, retention, and supervision by the HOA board, and breach of fiduciary duty by board members for ignoring documented complaints. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos from 7 different residents showing the entire confrontation. 4 prior written complaints filed with the HOA board, all dismissed with no action. Testimony from 11 other minority residents documenting similar treatment by Hastings. HOA board meeting minutes showing complaints were discussed, but no discipline imposed. Deputy Webb's incident report documenting the discriminatory pattern. Sign-in logs showing the Mitchell family had checked in properly. Emails from HOA board members dismissing concerns about Hastings' behavior as overreaction. The complaint detailed the pattern. 14 complaints over 6 years, 9 from families of color. 0 disciplinary actions. Documented board knowledge of the problem. Deliberate indifference to civil rights violations. The damages sought, $4.3 million. The HOA board's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached the same conclusion Mitchell had already known. Indefensible. The videos were everywhere. The pattern was documented. The board's own meeting minutes showed they'd been warned repeatedly and taken no action. The case law on Fair Housing Act violations and municipal liability was clear. They'd lose at trial, And the damages could be even higher. Insurance wouldn't cover it. The HOA's liability policy excluded discrimination claims when the entity had prior knowledge of the behavior. The board members faced personal liability. Their homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover intentional civil rights violations. They could lose their houses, their savings, their financial futures. Settlement negotiations began in October 2023. The board's attorneys recommended settling immediately to avoid trial and to minimize punitive damages. On December 18, 2023, the case settled. $4.3 million paid to the Mitchell family. $2.1 million covered by a special assessment on all Riverside Meadows homeowners. $6,176.47 per household. $2.2 million paid personally by the 5 board members, underjoint, and several liability. Mandatory adoption of anti-discrimination policies with third-party monitoring for 5 years. Mandatory fair housing training for all staff and board members. Public apology posted on the HOA website and mailed to all residents. Linda Hastings was terminated, named in the lawsuit, and contributed $25,000 toward the settlement under a separate agreement. She was unable to find employment in HOA management afterward. Richard Donovan paid $580,000 toward settlement, sold his home, and moved out of state. Susan Palmer filed for bankruptcy after paying $420,000. Greg Thomas paid $310,000, resigned from the board, and remained in the community as a pariah. Jennifer Wu paid $440,000 and divorced after financial stress destroyed her marriage. Mark Keller paid $450,000, sued the other board members for contribution, and lost. The HOA lost $2.1 million, triggered the largest special assessment in Tennessee HOA history, saw property values drop 12% as the story went national, and faced mass resignations from the board with no volunteers willing to replace them. The community was divided. Some residents supported Mitchell. Others blamed her for the financial cost. The subdivision became known nationally as that racist HOA in Tennessee. Should board members who ignore 3 or more discrimination complaints face automatic removal and personal liability? Drop your answer. Vanessa Mitchell testified at a Tennessee state legislative hearing on HOA governance reform 3 months after the settlement. Her testimony was powerful, clear, and undeniable. I'm a civil rights attorney with 14 years of experience, specializing in housing discrimination. I've sued HOAs before. I know how they operate. I know the law. And when I moved into Riverside Meadows with my 3 children, I knew what to document. She paused. I didn't want to have to document it. I wanted to live in a community where my children could swim in the pool without being told they don't belong. But from the first month we moved in, the pattern was clear. Linda Hastings treated us differently. She demanded IDs when white residents weren't asked. She questioned our guests when white residents' guests weren't questioned. She followed my children around the pool area when white children played unsupervised. I filed complaints, 4 of them, each one documented, each one submitted to the HOA board with witness statements and specific incidents. Do you know what the board did? Nothing. They spoke with Ms. Hastings. They noted her dedication. They told me she was just doing her job thoroughly. Mitchell's voice strengthened. That Saturday in July, my 8-year-old son was nearly in tears because a pool attendant ordered him out of the water in front of dozens of people, treating him like a criminal for swimming while black. My 10-year-old daughter had to explain to her friends why she's always asked for ID when they're not. My 12-year-old son had to watch his mother defend him against someone who should have been making him feel welcome. She looked directly at the committee. The HOA board had 14 complaints over 6 years, 9 from families of color. They had the pattern documented in their own meeting minutes. They knew. And they did nothing because addressing it would have meant admitting the problem. It would have meant confronting bias in their community. It would have meant potential liability. So they protected the pool attendant instead of the residents. They protected their comfort instead of our civil rights. And it cost them $4.3 million. Another pause. But here's what $4.3 million doesn't do. It doesn't erase my children's trauma. It doesn't restore the dignity they lost when a public authority figure treated them like they didn't belong in their own community. It doesn't undo the message they received that day, that even when you follow the rules, even when you have proof, Even when your mother is a lawyer, you can still be treated like a criminal for being black in a white space. If this can happen to my children with me sitting 30 feet away, with documentation, with resources, with legal knowledge, what happens to families who don't have those protections? What happens to the single mother working 2 jobs who can't take time off to file complaints? What happens to the family who doesn't know their rights? The committee room was silent. This wasn't just about a pool attendant who couldn't imagine black children belonged in an affluent subdivision. This was about an HOA board that had 14 complaints documenting a pattern of discrimination and chose to protect the discriminator instead of the discriminated. Linda Hastings' record told a story the Riverside Meadows HOA board refused to read. 14 complaints over 6 years, 9 from families of color. Every single complaint describing the same behavior: selective ID checks, questioning minority residents' right to be present, following black and Hispanic families, calling police for violations ignored when committed by white residents. The documentation was in the board's own meeting minutes. They discussed it. They acknowledged it. And they took no action because taking action would have meant admitting the community had a race problem. It's easier to dismiss individual complaints as misunderstandings than to acknowledge a pattern of bias. But patterns don't disappear because you refuse to see them. They escalate. Linda Hastings lost her job. That's accountability. The HOA paid $4.3 million. That's consequence. The board members paid personally, some losing their homes, their savings, their financial security. That's liability. But money doesn't restore dignity. Termination doesn't undo trauma. Financial consequences don't erase the message 3 black children received that day. You don't belong here, and even proof won't protect you. The real question is, what changes now? Do HOA boards finally understand that ignoring discrimination complaints creates personal liability? Do they finally connect the dots after 3 complaints instead of 14? Do communities finally recognize that just doing my job isn't a defense when the job is applied selectively based on race? Do we finally acknowledge that access to pools, parks, and community spaces shouldn't depend on passing a bias test from someone who decides who looks like they belong? Because if we don't fix the systems that allow HOA boards to ignore documented patterns, if we don't address the culture that validates assumptions over evidence, then we're just waiting for the next Linda Hastings, the next Riverside Meadows, the next family forced to prove they belong in their own home. Comment if you believe this should be law. HOA board members face mandatory personal liability and removal when they ignore 3 or more discrimination complaints documenting a pattern of bias. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with exposure and change starts with consequences, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing HOAs that protect bias over people. We're going to keep demanding better for families who just want to swim in peace. This isn't just about one pool attendant or one HOA board. It's about all of us and the communities we're willing to tolerate. Communities where children have to prove they belong. Communities where documentation isn't enough. Communities where 3 complaints are ignored until lawsuit number 1 forces accountability. We can do better. We have to do better. Because the next family shouldn't need a civil rights attorney for a mother just to swim in their own community pool.